Welcome to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms. Much of investing in real estate comes down to making a plan and sticking with it. Today, you're going to hear an incredible story of a real estate investor who found himself in an extremely difficult situation, but found the courage and the information to transform his life. You'll be inspired and learn some tangible tools you can use to take your investing to the next level. Today on the Real Estate Guys radio program. As real estate investors, it's no secret that the real estate guys love Florida, and the Sunshine State continues to receive more than its fair share of businesses and population relocating from the Northeast, which has created a huge opportunity for real estate investors. So come join Russ and me in mid-August for our Jacksonville, Palm Coast, Ocala field trip. On this highly interactive trip, you'll get an up-close, hands-on, personal experience you'd be hard-pressed to find elsewhere. You'll feel the vibrancy of the markets, observe the quality of the infrastructure, and truly get a sense for the demographics, all things you just can't do by simply searching online. Plus, we'll introduce you to our Boots on the Ground team, and you'll meet some amazing investors from all over. To reserve your spot, go to realestateguysradio.com and click Events, where you'll find the Jacksonville field trip. There's a big difference between researching a market from afar and seeing it with your own eyes. So join the Real Estate Guys as we explore not one, but 3 amazing real estate markets. Go to realestateguysradio.com and click Events for the Jacksonville, Palm Coast, Ocala field trip. See you there. Welcome to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms. Joining me, as usual, it's our co-host financial strategist, Russell Gray.
Hey, Robert.
You know, we've been on this series of The Road Ahead the last many weeks, and it's been awesome finding out what people are watching, where they're headed, what their eyes are on, and a bunch of the smartest people we know have taken us through all kinds of things to be thinking about. And now that we're done with that series, it's like, what to talk about next? Well, we have an amazing topic today and a guest that you are going to dig.
Yeah, you know, if you really think about it, you look at what's going on in the world, and when we talk about the road ahead, we're all looking at the externals. We're looking at what's coming at us, how we're going to react to it, what we can do to navigate, to take advantage of opportunity, to mitigate or avoid loss. And that's kind of the basic thing of being an investor. But ultimately, investing is a lot like being an entrepreneur. It all starts with you. We talk about personal investment philosophy all the time. Robert Kiyosaki's taught us kind of the be, do, have. You've got to change who you are, and then who you are manifests in how you behave or what you do, and then that ultimately results in what you have. So I've always looked at it, what you think and believe affects the actions you take, and the actions you take produce your results. And so the thing is, if you don't understand that basic concept, you're running around there trying to change your behavior, and you're swimming against your nature. You're swimming against your paradigms. You're fighting against the way you are naturally inclined to behave. And unless you have supreme discipline, you're probably going to fail. So it really has to go back to changing the way you think and how you see the world. That's why Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, was so powerful, because it opened people's minds up to the whole idea of being an investor and an entrepreneur versus being an employee or a self-employed person. And so if you don't deal with your mindset right at the get-go, especially when there's all kinds of external change, you're going to be at a huge disadvantage. The world will change and you don't.
We meet so many people who either are successful real estate investors who want to be, have, and do more, or they're trying to figure out, how do I become successful in my life and my business in real estate investing? And there is so much to that. Success leaves clues, and you can learn from people who are doing it well, and you can learn from people who have made mistakes. And today we are thrilled to have both. The gentleman you're about to meet has been incredibly successful in more than one industry, but at the same time, he had a really phenomenal experience that we'll say has changed the course of his life. And thankfully for all of us, he has got some great distinctions and lessons, and is going to share some keys today that will help you become more successful wherever you've come from and wherever you're going. When we come back, you'll meet Mike Dillard today on the Real Estate Guys radio program.
Real estate investment advice right in your mailbox. Sign up for the free Real Estate Guys newsletter at realestateguysradio.com.
Hey, ever wished you could go back in time and do some tax planning? Now you can, just like Marty McFly. Lucky for you, a brand new federal law just made this possible with an EQRP to get tax deductions and reduce your taxable income from last year, so you can use that tax savings to invest in real estate, Bitcoin, gold, even your own business. Whether you're a full-time investor, doctor, government employee, even if you have 5 or 50 employees, the EQRP works and is your secret weapon, and now it's retroactive. Hey, I'm Damian Lupo, and we have your solution. By the way, if you got bad advice and used an IRA for an apartment syndication, you are sitting on a U-bit time bomb. But don't worry, there's a solution, the EQRP. The EQRP company is ready to help you get control of your money, kill U-bit, and help you pay way less taxes. Want to learn more about this strategy? Send an email to eqrp@realestateguysradio.com for my special EQRP report. Paying tax or letting Wall Street suck you dry is dumb. Your first step is freeing your retirement money by sending an email to eqrp@realestateguysradio.com today.
Hi there, this is Danielle DiMartino Booth, author of Fed Up, an insider's take on why the Federal Reserve is bad for America, and you're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program. A quarter of a century on the radio and still counting. Thanks for tuning into the show. We're talking about more than just your real estate today, but really your life, and the way you think, and the way that your experience either propels you or slows you down. And the gentleman you're about to meet, I learned about many years ago from our good friend and attorney, Mauricio Raul. Mike Dillard has had an incredible ride, if you will, in all kinds of different industries. He's got an awesome book. Let's welcome to the Real Estate Guys, Mr. Mike Dillard. Hey, Mike.
Robert, thank you so much for having me. Russ, it's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, I'm sure some of our listeners are familiar with various stages of your work, but before we get to really the big topic we've asked you to share today, take us just through a little bit of background, being an entrepreneur, the book, some of the different businesses that you've been a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 44 today. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur by the time I was in college. That was back in around the year 2000, 1996 to 2000. We didn't have the internet that we have today. We didn't have social media or YouTube or any of those things. So the only opportunity that was available widely back then to a broke college student was network marketing. And so that's really where I started to get my feet wet. And unfortunately, I was absolutely horrible at it. I failed to make $1 for my first 5 or 6 years. And then I finally figured it out. I finally figured out how to market. And I went from there to building my first $1 million business by the age of 27. That turned into a multiple 8-figure business. And then around the age of 30, I left that industry and I figured out that I had no idea what to do with the money that my business was making. I had all of the stuff that a single man in his 20s would have who's making that kind of cash. I had the car, the house, the boat, the trips and all of those adventures. But I didn't have really any kind of net worth beyond that. And I realized that was a mistake. And that was right around 2008 as well. And I watched my parents lose 50% of their net worth and all of their friends. And that was a huge wake-up call for me. And the fact that I realized what I did not want to do with my money. I didn't want to do what the middle class and the average person was doing, but I didn't know what else to do. And so that sent me down a rabbit hole. And that's when I became friends with Robert Kiyosaki and Ken McElroy and Tom Wheelwright and Mauricio and met Russ and that whole crew. And I started a business around 2010 and in the financial education space. And I really wanted to learn how to invest like the rich. What were the wealthy doing that allowed them to make money during a crash like '08 that the average person was not? And that was another very successful business, multiple 8 figures over the next 3 to 4 years. And I retired from that business in 2014. And then went a completely different direction, ended up building the world's first hydroponic farm for your kitchen with Dr. Peter Diamandis. That was a really fun entrepreneurial endeavor in a very different industry. But something interesting happened a few years into that process. I believe I started development of that in 2015. The prototype was in my living room in my condo in downtown Austin. It was incredible. We were growing, I think, $4,000 a year worth of organic produce for $400 worth of electricity, seeds, and fertilizer. Wow. So, the goal there was to decentralize the food industry and to reduce food costs by 90%. And it was amazing. It was an amazing project, but I started to feel really funny in 2018 from a physical perspective. I started to lose my ability to handle stress, and I started to lose my ability to really fall asleep. I started to have insomnia, and life just became a bit more challenging and a bit more difficult. And then on June 13th of 2018, I was sitting on my couch taking a break from work, and I remember feeling a little click in the back of my head. And I was like, that's kind of weird. I don't think you're supposed to feel things like that there. But it wasn't painful, so I really didn't think much about it and just kind of went about my day until that night when I physically couldn't fall asleep at all. The next day, couldn't fall asleep at all, tried to take a nap, physically couldn't fall asleep. The next night, couldn't fall asleep. And that went on for about 7 days and nights straight. And so a full entire week without a single minute of sleep was terrifying. And, if you ever stay up for 24 hours, it's like a badge of honor, right? That you tell your buddies about. It's like, I've been up for 24 hours. Well, that was over 100 hours for me. Wow. And I could feel my body starting to shut down. And I was basically living on my couch at that point. And I was obviously talking to my doctor on the phone, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. And we didn't know, but he gave me a prescription for Xanax and Ambien, which I've never taken before. And I took that, and it got me about 90 minutes of this kind of weird, disassociated, dreamlike sleep. It was enough to keep me alive, but it was not enough to, help me heal or recover. And that's when things changed, because that went on for over 6 months. I lost my mental ability to think. I was experiencing extreme paranoia that turned into suicidal thoughts and tendencies. And I would basically go from my bed at night and get 60 to 90 minutes of this weird medicated sleep to waking up and lying in bed again for the rest of the night. And then I would move to the couch during the day. All of my business endeavors came to a stop. Walking down the street just became a challenge. Driving became a challenge. And that, for me, my hobby is as a professional race car driver. So for me, going 160 miles an hour around a race car circuit is fun. And now I'm having trouble driving 55 miles an hour down, Mopac. Wow. So that was tough. And what it made it really hard was the fact that nobody knew what was wrong. And when you get on Google or YouTube and you type in your symptoms and you can't find a single article or video or story or person who has had a similar experience, then that's when things get really scary, because you don't know what you're trying to heal from or fix at that point. And I think that started basically a 3-year process to figure out what was going on and to try to fix that. But during that process, it really changed who I was in every capacity. Losing your identity is something that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. But that's what I had to go through, because my identity was as a successful entrepreneur, was someone who was really good at building businesses and making money and all of these things. And all of a sudden, I couldn't do any of that anymore. And so I went to every doctor that I could find. If somebody had an idea or a path to go down, I would go down it. And it took a year before I found a doctor that finally figured out what had happened. And her name is Ann Shippey, and I'll be forever grateful for her. But she gave me a mycotoxin test one day, and I didn't know what that was, but that tests for neurotoxins that are released by toxic mold. And my results came back about a month later, and the test went from 0 to 5. Anything under 5 was, the normal range. Anything above 5, all the way up to the top of the scale was 50, was dangerous. And mycotoxins, again, are neurotoxins that start to affect the brain, the neurochemistry, and it's no different really in many regards to lead poisoning or toxic metal poisoning. Well, my result was 21,000.
Wow.
On a chart that went to 50. And so that was obviously what was wrong. And we assumed that happened because the building that I lived in was flooded about 6 months before I started to get those symptoms. And then all of a sudden I started to get super, super sick. So that was the good news, is we figured out what had gone wrong, and now we needed to heal the nervous system. And going for a year, it ended up being more than 2 years, but a year or two without sleep wreaked havoc on the nervous system from a PTSD standpoint. And so I went through every type of therapy you could think of, from transcranial magnetic to EMDR to 9-ketamine IVs to neurolinguistic, programming retraining to neurofeedback, hypnotherapy, several MDMA therapy sessions, all kinds of different plant medicines and psilocybin. I did probably 20 years of the most alternative types of therapies there are in about 24 months. And what came out of that was really interesting. One, it allowed me to see all of the different parts of my subconscious that I'd never really seen before. And our subconscious is what we operate by on a daily basis. It's what, is involved in 95% of our decisions and our identity, and everything that we do and everything that we've achieved or not achieved is a result of what's happening at a subconscious level. And this work allowed me to finally see mine and become aware of it in the programs that we're running. The second thing that it did is it allowed me to become very aware of my neurochemistry. Part of the challenges that I went through were extreme adrenal fatigue, extreme cortisol activation and adrenaline activation. I would get just waves of adrenaline down my legs every 5 to 10 seconds for days at a time, because my brain was basically trying to run away from an invisible thing that was eating it. So it was acting accordingly. But it allowed me to start to see how my body responded from a neurochemical perspective. And those two things really started to shine a light on all kinds of different aspects of my life, including money. And one of the hardest parts about this entire process is, my ability to generate an income stopped, but the bills did not stop coming in. And when you're in a challenge like that, if you're an optimist, you're always 30 days away from being better or from being healed and getting back to where you were. So I didn't want to fire my staff. I didn't want to close down all of the software that runs my business or do any of those things. And so, tens of thousands of dollars of bills kept coming in.
Right.
And for me, my backup plan from a money perspective was always my business. When you've got a business producing millions of dollars a year, you don't really think that much about money.
Yep.
Until it stops coming in one day. And that's one contingency that I had never planned on, at the age of 40.
Right.
But that was the case. And so a big priority for me during that time, around the year 1.5, 2, was, holy smokes, what if this doesn't ever get better? And what if I don't figure this out? And what if I really can't work again and get back to what I'm really good at doing? How am I going to live? So healing was priority 1, but figuring out how to generate passive investment income was priority number 2. And so I really spent a lot of time going down that rabbit hole, and that became a big area of focus. And what I realized is that when it comes to money, most people, myself included, in the at least the past version of me, when you start to think about investing and producing passive income, okay, well, what is the opportunity or the strategy that I'm going to pursue, and what's the return on this going to be, right? And you make a decision based on those two factors for the most part. But what I realized, looking back at my past career, is that really comes down to a 3-part puzzle. And the strategy component or the opportunity component is part number 3. And it's the least important part. The first part are your neurochemical habits. The second part is your subconscious programming. And when I had these new insights, I could look back at my past and I could see a pattern that I call the make it, spend it, risk it cycle. And so most entrepreneurs have this cycle where we're very good at making money, but then when we either spend it or we risk it. We risk it on investments, putting it into a buddy's startup, crypto, real estate, whatever it may be, or we risk it starting a new business, at the end of the day, or spending it on a new podcast studio or a car or a house or whatever. So it just starts this make it, spend it, risk it cycle. And I realized I'd gone through that probably 3 or 4 times during my 15, 20-year career as an entrepreneur, where I'd make millions of dollars, then I would spend it or risk it, and it would go away, and I'd have to make it all back again. Once I saw that pattern, I could then see it in all of my colleagues as well. And when I would talk to them about it, they're like, holy crap, I've been doing the same thing. And it became really fascinating to me that entrepreneurs have this pattern. I'd say 80 to 90% of them have this. And when you have something that is that common and that prevalent through a career type, if you will, that's really interesting to me. And what I realized is that most entrepreneurs have an addiction to adrenaline from a neurochemical standpoint. We are very comfortable with cortisol in our system, and cortisol is our stress hormone that causes stress or anxiety. Entrepreneurs by default are wired to take risks. It's why we are able to do what we do, where most people would crumble under the pressure. We kind of move towards it and thrive in that environment. But when you apply that addiction to cortisol and adrenaline to investing, then that ends up in a really bad situation. This was just my big light bulb moment where it's like, oh my gosh, all of my past makes so much sense now. And if I had not figured this out, I would have just repeated the same pattern. If I had, again, went straight for looking for an investment strategy and passive income, whatever it may be. And if I hadn't figured out those other first two components, it would have just resulted in the same cycle. And so this kind of became my life's mission, at least now, and probably for the next few years, is making people aware of these two invisible parts of their being that control everything else that they're doing, specifically and especially when it comes to money. And so I'll kind of put this in a brief example that I think people will be able to relate to. So we have 5 hormones that are going through our blood right now and at every minute of every day. The first is dopamine, which is your feel-good reward system. The second is serotonin, which is your pride or accomplishment type of feeling whenever you get an award or walk across the stage or get recognized for something that you do. You have oxytocin, which is your love and your connection hormone. Then you have, again, cortisol, which is your stress and anxiety hormone. And then you have endorphins, which is your numbness, if you will, or morphine, right? If you get an injury and you can't feel it, that's endorphins, running through your system at that point. What ends up happening, at least in modern society, is if you've grown up in the West, you've grown up being exposed to messages all throughout the day, whether it's on television or radio or social media, that are designed to cause you stress, right? If you jump on Facebook right now or Instagram, you're going to see stuff on Twitter, wherever it may be, that's going to catch your attention. It's going to light up your limbic system, and it's going to cause a little fight or flight response, and it's going to cause stress and anxiety, and it's going to cause your body to release cortisol. These companies and these algorithms do that because they know that your brain cannot help but pay attention to a perceived threat. It is hardwired into our neurology. And then what they do is, on the advertising perspective, is that they have advertisers that offer the antidote to cortisol, which is dopamine, serotonin, or oxytocin. We're going to stick with primarily dopamine. And that is typically acquired in the Western world today by the food that you eat, the stuff that you drink, or the things that you buy. Right. And so for your body to get rid of cortisol, it has to have a feel-good hormone, usually dopamine, as a literal antidote to that, to get it out of your bloodstream. And the fastest way to get dopamine are one of those 3 things. And so all of us have our go-to habits that we don't even think about today in order to get dopamine, whether that's going into the cupboard to get a cookie or a bag of chips, or the freezer to get some ice cream or a beer, a glass of wine, or to put on your favorite YouTube channel or, series on Netflix, play a video game, go for a drive in your car, whatever it may be. We all have our pattern that we go to in order to extinguish that stress and anxiety and that cortisol. The challenge is that all of them at some point or another cost money. All of them cost money, right? And if you have been patterned to get rid of your stress and anxiety and your cortisol by spending money, whether that's going shopping for a purse or jumping on Amazon or buying a bottle of wine, whatever it may be, that becomes your pattern. And neurons that fire together, wire together. And after an extended period of time, this becomes your default mode. It becomes your subconscious go-to pattern, where before you know it, you've got something in your hand, again, that's giving you that pleasure, and you're completely oblivious to the fact that you're doing it. And at that point, they've got you, because now your brain has literally been hardwired to buy things or to spend money or to eat a food, whatever it may be, in order to get rid of that stress that you're being exposed to on a daily basis. Now, if you have that as your default pattern, that's what I'm going to call an inverted dopamine response, meaning you have an unhealthy dopamine response. You get dopamine by spending money and consuming things, where a healthy dopamine response would mean that you basically get dopamine from saving money and from investing your money, if we take that from a financial perspective. So if we were to look at someone like Warren Buffett, he literally gets pleasure from investing and saving his money. That's why he's lived in the same house he has for 30 plus years. He actually gets stress and anxiety when he spends money, which is why he doesn't do it. So if you have a healthy dopamine response like Warren does, becoming rich and building a net worth is effortless. It literally does not require effort at all. It's just your default habit. If you're like 95% of Americans, you have an inverted dopamine response. It's literally painful to save money, because if you're saving money, you're not allowing yourself to receive the pleasure that you would want, your brain normally wants when you're spending that money, and it becomes impossible for you to build wealth and to become rich over the long run. A great analogy or association to this is fitness.
Yeah.
It's why going to the gym and trying to lose weight requires so much willpower and so much effort and so much commitment, because your body has its default mode that it's used to, especially when it comes to its dopamine response and how it's getting pleasure. And so if you try to go to the gym, and on one hand, your brain is basically, wired in its old habits, and then you try to use willpower to break that habit and to start a new one, well, your default mode doesn't require any energy at all. It just is. It's there all the time. It just is, and it's just a part of who you are. Where the other mode requires a ton of energy and a ton of effort and a ton of calories and a ton of brain power and a ton of, commitment and all of these discipline and all of these things. And at some point, for most people, they usually get tired and they run out of that ability to fight that fight. And then the default's like, well, cool, I'm still here. I'll take over if you're exhausted, and boom, you go back to your old habits. Same thing with money. This is why people can read all of Robert's books, which are excellent, or they can go through, all of the different financial savings programs like Dave Ramsey's stuff. And a few people will be successful, maybe 10, 15% will be successful, and the other people will not. And the reason that they're not is because they're fighting this neurochemical addiction that they don't even know that they have. That's part number one. Part number two is the subconscious program. And so once you start to feel stress and anxiety, which we all do, the question becomes, well, what decision are you going to make and what action are you going to take based on that anxiety? And the interesting part about this is that we could take 100 people and we could all give them $100,000, and we could say, you all have to go invest it into stocks, right? Do your best. And at the end of the year, we're going to come back and we're going to compare everybody's results. Everybody's going to do their best, and you're going to find that 10% are going to do great, 80% are going to do not so great. The other 10% are going to lose all of their money and whatever it may be. But the interesting part about that is that if you ran that experiment again for a second year, I can almost guarantee you that the same exact people are going to basically get the same kind of result. And that's because the decisions that they're making are based, again, off the neurochemical habits in their subconscious program. This is why we see so many athletes, 60+% file bankruptcy within 3 years after leaving their career as a football player or a basketball player. This is why we see 80% of lottery winners lose their money within 3 to 5 years after all of this stuff. These people won. They won the rat race that everybody else is trying to play, which is the make money game, right? They made the money. They won the game. They have millions, if not tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. Same thing goes with celebrities. So they won the game, and yet within 3 to 5 years, they lost it all, which means making money is not the key to building wealth, right? That's why this third part of the program is not that important. What they didn't do is they didn't fix the brain neurochemistry, and they didn't fix their subconscious program, so they defaulted back to where they were comfortable. And for a lot of people who have had trouble either making money or keeping money that they make, at the end of the day, there's a subconscious program that is behind that. And that usually has to do with something that they picked up between the ages of 3 and 7 years old that associates having money or making money with danger of some kind. Maybe they picked it up at church, where money is evil. Money is the root of all evil, right? Maybe they picked it up with their parent who went to work and came home with stories about how their rich boss is making all the money and they're working so hard, and whatever it may be. Or overhearing jealousy of the neighbor who got the new BMW, and rich Bob is just a arrogant whatever it may be. When you're that young, you don't really know what that means. You just know that the people who are responsible for keeping you alive don't like that, and your subconscious says, these guys are, these rich guys, our parents don't like them, and that's dangerous for us, or we could go to hell, or whatever it may be. We're going to go ahead and just store this in the back of our brain, and we're going to say that making money is going to be a dangerous thing, and we shouldn't do that, because if we make money, then we might get kicked out of our tribe, and if we get kicked out of the tribe, we're going to die, which has been the case for 99% of humanity's history until recently. And so you might not remember the moment that you picked up that story or that belief or made that decision, but at some point you did. And that's why people who have been going to every entrepreneurial event for a decade and reading all of the entrepreneur books and starting all of the entrepreneur businesses, and yet they can't make a dollar, or maybe they make it for a brief moment in time and then lose it again. That's why they've got a story running in the background. That's why people, again, who have made a lot of money and then they keep losing it. Well, there's a story behind that as well. For me, my story was I'm not good enough. And that was acquired in elementary school when I was getting bullied all the time. If those two components of your being are not brought into awareness, and then they're not rewired or reprogrammed, then the patterns you've been repeating throughout your entire life will continue to repeat. You're not going to get a different result. I guarantee you, if you've become a crypto millionaire and you've had this make it, spend it, risk it pattern where you've lost your money previously, you're going to lose it again if you haven't already. And so that's what I've really been focused on. Is my wife, Michelle, and I have spent the last 2 years basically helping people go through these two problems and helping them rewire their neurochemistry, helping them rewire their subconscious programs, and then helping them learn how to invest, their money and build passive income. And this system that we have really has changed my life. It's changed hers. We had very different money stories, but it's affected both of us in a life-changing way. And it's been awesome to see, because when we share this information specifically with entrepreneurs, even though it's relevant with everyone, it's always met with, oh my God, you're talking about me. So it's been amazing to see how prevalent that is.
Well, Mike, this is fascinating. And, first of all, thank you for your candor, humility, going through that. Couldn't have been easy. But I got to feel like, thank goodness it was you, because you really have sat up and taken notice and now put this into a framework that not only will allow people to recognize it, but hopefully do something about it. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll find out from Mike, what can you do to change those two things so that number 3 will work for you? You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Need help with your real estate investment portfolio? Check out the resources page at realestateguysradio.com.
Forbes rated Memphis the best cash flow market in the nation. And our good friend Terry Kerr at Mid-South Home Buyers has been the premier turnkey rental property provider in Memphis for over 13 years. With an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, Terry has renovated over 750 houses. Real Estate Guys listeners have snapped up hundreds. Discover what these satisfied investors already know. Mid-South's properties are completely renovated with a 1-year warranty and a lifelong rental guarantee. They're affordable, well-managed, and easy to own. Perfect for beginning investors and veterans alike. Get in on the action. Contact Terry and his team via email at midsouth@realestateguysradio.com.
Self-storage is an asset class that has stood the test of time. Going into the Great Recession of 2008, self-storage had the least negative impact of any of its commercial real estate peers, and it had explosive growth coming out of that time during the recovery. Fast forward to 2020, and you'll see that same pattern during some of the worst part of the pandemic. Hi, my name is Dave Zook, founder and CEO of The Real Asset Investor. Our operating partners are some of the best in the business, and we've had great success over the last decade buying mom and pop operated self-storage facilities and taking them to the next level by forcing value through increasing the square footage, adding climate controlled units, bringing in our professional management teams, and turning the project into an institutional target. We have self-storage investment opportunities available for accredited investors who are interested in investing in this space for cash flow, tax impact, and huge equity appreciation. Reach out to us today at selfstorage@realestateguysradio.com.
Hi, I'm Aaron Katusa, the chairman of Katusa Research. You're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. If you've ever wanted to make a bigger impact and have greater influence in your life, then come on out to How to Win Funds and Influence People, our 2-day annual workshop on consultative selling. If you've got clients, if you've got kids, if you've got relationships, you're going to want to be there. All the details on our website at realestateguysradio.com under events. We're talking with Mike Dillard. What an amazing story. Before we get back to it, it's time to play Real Estate Trivia. That's your chance to win a prize by knowing today's Real Estate Trivia question. Just a moment, I'll give you a question that has to do with some place on Earth. And your mission is to come up with the answer as soon as you think you know it. Send your best guess to trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Trivia@realestateguysradio.com includes your name, the answer to the question, and your mailing address. The first person that gets it right gets an awesome book, which is quite appropriate for today's topic, called Persistence, Pivots, and Game Changers, Turning Challenges into Opportunities. Lots of impactful stories in that book, including one from our own Russell Gray. Last week on The Real Estate Guys, we were wrapping up our series on the road ahead with Peter Schiff, and we asked this: Puerto Rico boasts the largest and most extensive rum factory in the world. What's it called? Well, lots of folks knew it was Casa Bacardi. Yep, the Bacardi Rum Factory was established in 1862 in San Juan. It's the largest rum distillery in the world, producing more than 100,000 liters of rum every 24 hours. And the distillery in Puerto Rico contributes nearly 85% of Bacardi's total rum production, with the remainder being produced at distilleries in Mexico and India. Here's our real estate trivia question for this week. The country of Bolivia, located in western central South America, had another name during its Spanish rule. What was it? Yeah, what was Bolivia called before it was called Bolivia? If you know or want to look it up, just send your best guess to trivia@realestateguysradio.com, trivia@realestateguysradio.com. Give us your name, the answer to the question, and your physical mailing address so we can send you persistence, pivots, and game changers. That's today's real estate trivia question. We're talking today about how you can make a massive change with something you might not even know was wrong. Our guest is Mike Dillard. What a story, Mike. And again, I'm sitting here exactly like everybody else going, he is talking to me. This is exactly the pattern, this whole make it, spend it, risk it. And we decide, we get successful, and off we go. And wow. So let's talk about, what can people do? You noticed this and you started to see the distinctions. And I would think, and I love the point that, hey, the investment vehicle, that's the least important thing. You're going to need that. But before you can get to that, you got to think through this neurochemistry piece, which I think is maybe the hardest to understand. Not that the subconscious is an easy topic, but at least we kind of get it. So take us through, what are some of the things that you've discerned that can help people, one, figure it out, and then two, get over it?
Yeah, absolutely. So awareness is key number one, right? Awareness is such a big piece, because as soon as you become aware of what's going on, you're like, oh my gosh, and you can see what's happening, and then you can start to make changes. And so from a neurochemical perspective, the goal is to rewire that inverted dopamine response.
Yep.
We want to train your brain to get pleasure when you save and invest money. I can go through a couple of just exercises that we teach people to do in the program. And one of the first is just an interruption to the existing pattern when you recognize it taking place. And so the next time that you get stressed or anxious or excited, you're probably going to want to go down that same path you've typically gone down. And for me, that is usually shopping of some kind. And in the past, it used to be sports cars. Thank gosh, that's not the case anymore. But I would start jumping online and looking at car reviews and start to mentally shop for the next sports car that I wanted to buy, right? I think I spent over $3 million on Ferraris and Porsches in like a 10-year period.
As you do, yeah.
Yeah, but that was my deal. Again, it might be as simple as going down to your favorite restaurant and getting a glass of wine, whatever it may be. But as soon as you see yourself doing this pattern, doing this thing again, it's to interrupt it. And let's just say you're driving down to Best Buy. You want to go shopping for something, a new MacBook or whatever it may be. You see the pattern taking place. Well, what you can do is just pull over. And the single most effective way to regulate your nervous system and to change these chemicals that are going through your blood is through your breathing. If you're a fan of Wim Hof or you know about his work, you'll know that your breath can literally control your nervous system in unbelievable ways. And a really easy way to change that cortisol spike that you're going through and that desire to go after dopamine is to just pull over and do a very simple breathing exercise. It's called box breathing. And it's basically a breath for 6 seconds in, and then you hold it for 6 seconds, and then you breathe out for 6 seconds, and then you hold for 6 seconds, and then you breathe in for 6 seconds. And it's this 4-part box, if you will, of in 6, hold, out 6, hold. You're going to know if you do that 5 or 6 times, it is going to cause a very different shift in your physiology. The first thing that you're going to notice is that your mouth is going to start to water. And that is a sign that you've gone from a sympathetic activated nervous system to a parasympathetic state, which is your rest and digest. The moment that you get kicked into parasympathetic, you're going to notice that activated desire to go hunt or buy or acquire something is going to be greatly diminished. It's going to be reduced by 80 to 90%. That is your window of opportunity. to then make a different choice and to make a different decision, because you've now interrupted that neural pathway that is usually firing and you've stopped it. And now it's time to make a different decision. And after you do that enough times, it becomes very, very easy. The more you do it, the easier it becomes, and you start to literally rewire those neural connections. A second thing that you can do is you can basically future pace. Our brains don't know the difference between what we imagine and what we experience in real life. It is all the same to our brain. This is why athletes have their future pacing process, where they're imagining going through and executing their jump or their run or their race or whatever it is that they're doing. And it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. You can do the same thing when it comes to your financial decisions or for your habits, if you will, your spending habits. And so let's say you're in the market for a new $5,000, Mac laptop that you want for your office, and you have all of the reasons that you could possibly want to justify that expense.
Yep.
Well, instead you could go sit down, lay down in your bed or your couch, and you can go through that process and close your eyes and imagine yourself driving down to the store and picking out the laptop and, checking out for it and paying for it, bringing it home, opening the box, pulling it out of the box, going through the registration process. We all know the noise that Mac makes when it boots up for the first time, and the cellophane coming off the screen makes. And you can make it as detailed and as real as you want, and the more detailed, the better. And you can feel, and you want to feel, the pleasure and the pride that you would have from opening that brand new, beautiful computer. And what you're doing as you do this is you're giving your brain what it wants. You're giving it that dopamine and that serotonin that it is after. And that is all that it wants. It actually doesn't want a new computer. It just wants these hormones, because it's basically a little drug addict. Then what you can do is you can imagine yourself using it, and then you can go out 2 weeks into the future, and you go into your office and your computer's set up there. And now, how do you feel about it? It's still kind of cool. You know that it's still kind of new, but at this point, you're kind of getting used to it.
Right.
It's becoming just another tool on your desk. You can go out a month or two, and same thing. Imagine walking into your office where your computer is. And now, how do you feel about it? Well, now kind of the new luster is gone. It's starting to get a little dusty, and it's just another computer that worked probably just as well as your previous one. And that newness starts to fade, and that dopamine and serotonin doesn't really come in anymore, and it starts to go away. And at this point, that desire, if you go back in and you check on whether or not you still want to go down and go to the store and go to Best Buy and buy the computer, or would you imagine $5,000 in cash in your hand? Which would you rather have now? And 90+% of the time, you're going to want the cash, because your brain got what it wanted. It got all of the serotonin and the status and the newness and the dopamine and the pleasure that it was seeking, but you kept that $5,000 in your pocket this time instead. And so that's another thing that, I do in the car thing now. If I ever get the desire to do it, after owning my first Ferrari, there was nothing like that experience, and the pleasure that I received from picking that car up for the first time. People would come and when I'd pull up at a restaurant, they'd come and want to see it or sit in it or whatever, right? By the third Ferrari, it was just another car.
Wow.
And here's what people don't understand is dopamine and serotonin, or any of the neurochemicals, are just like anything else in life, meaning that your brain gets used to them. And the more it gets used to them, the more it takes in order to feel that same level of pleasure. It's just like caffeine. That's why if you haven't had caffeine in a while, you drink a cup of coffee, man, are you wired? But if you drink it daily, and then you need 2 cups and then 3 cups or whatever, just to get that same rush,
yeah,
it's no different with anything else, including what you buy. And so that's why, you buy the $50,000 sports car. Oh, that's awesome. Well, now you need the $100,000 one, and then you need the $300,000 one, and then you need the $1 million Bugatti, and whatever it may be, just in order to get that same exact feeling. Unfortunately, that's a dynamic that leads you to, again, spending money if you're wired to get pleasure from spending money.
Yeah.
This is also with entrepreneurs. Your first goal is to make 100 grand. And then your next goal is to make $1 million. Ask every entrepreneur, once you make $1 million, what's your next goal? It's to make $10 million. And then after that, well, it's $100 million. And that keeps going until you either do it or you break down from the stress of that kind of cyclical nature.
Yeah.
But the message at the end of the day, or the lesson, is that you will never, ever, ever, ever be satisfied, because your brain is not wired to be satisfied.
Awesome. Well, so those are really a couple of practical techniques for sure. Wish we had more time, but let's talk about the subconscious, because I'm imagining there's probably tools that you have become aware of that you can use there as well.
The subconscious is more challenging because it usually takes the assistance of an outside person or guide to help you get into that state. So the first thing is you have to get into a state that will allow you to access your subconscious.
Yeah.
Probably the easiest and most accessible is meditation, but that can also be very difficult to actually get into a subconscious state or level of awareness that will allow you to see your subconscious patterns, because unless you are a really experienced person when it comes to meditation, your conscious is still going to be kind of there policing your experience.
Yep.
So I found that there are really three effective ways to access your subconscious. The first that is legal is hypnotherapy, and that's highly effective. So I worked with a hypnotherapist, Elliot Rowe, for many, many months. He works with a lot of big Silicon Valley founders and athletes. Working with a hypnotherapist is unbelievably effective. It's just as effective as plant medicines or some of the other things that we'll talk about here next. But when you can come out of one of those sessions and accessing and seeing when a decision was made at 7 years old that has affected your entire life since then, and come out of that session in a very cathartic emotional release, that's when you know you've really hit something deep and transformed that. And that I've experienced that many times in hypnotherapy. The next thing that you can do that is accessible and legal is to go through a neurolinguistic programming training program, if you will. And this is basically using linguistic techniques to access your subconscious programs through your language and your language patterns. They also use a very effective tool that we use as well, called timeline therapy, which is very, very effective at accessing and reprogramming your subconscious. Those are extremely effective. Number 3 would be plant medicines. These are definitely some of the most powerful. They're not very accessible, though, because some of them are not legal. You might have to leave the country for some, or be willing to take that risk here in the country. But there's a great book that I would read called A Dose of Hope, and that is about MDMA therapy. And MDMA therapy literally saved my life. This is what allowed me to repair all of the PTSD that came from the mold. It is probably the most powerful way to access your subconscious, because it's like the veil of the Matrix comes off and you see just straight to the truth of everything. Every single interaction you've had in your life, encounter, relationship, decision, you see all of it, and you see it in a very loving way, meaning you're not being re-traumatized. You're not going back and maybe you were raped or sexually abused. When you go back and you see that stuff through MDMA and look at that situation again, you get to see it from outside of yourself, and you don't associate into the trauma and relive that. And you get to then reframe it and reprogram how that experience went, or what it did for you, or what it meant to you. And it's one of the single most powerful therapies that I could ever recommend to someone. With that in mind, it is not legal in the US. 2, you should only ever do this with an experienced guide who does this full time. And 3, you have to be very careful these days, because you have to be certain that the MDMA that you would acquire or take is from a very pure source, because a lot of it's laced with fentanyl these days, and it could be lethal. And so, all of those disclaimers go along with that. But if you find the right person or group who administers that kind of therapy, it is the single most powerful thing you could ever experience. And there are other medicines that you can do as well. But we basically take people. So over the last 3 years of going through this, Michelle and I have both become certified in neurolinguistic programming and with hypnotherapy and with timeline therapy. So she does this full-time for all of our clients and our customers. I do it from a higher 50,000 foot level when it comes to, the books and the training courses that we do. But timeline therapy is very accessible. It's something you can do with any good NLP practitioner, or you can do it with us. And this is a way to go back. I actually just had a session for myself today, and relive experiences in your past and reprogram those, and literally remove those experiences from your life and from your past and your timeline, and to reframe them in a different way. And once you do that, it changes every single thing that you do moving forward, because the pattern is no longer in your neurology. And so those would be kind of the top ways that you can do that. So the subconscious is a little bit more, active and involved. And if you have a guide or a coach, it's much, much better. It's a bit difficult to do on your own.
Well, this is fascinating. And obviously you've lived through this. It's great to see that you've embraced it. Mike, if someone's interested, if this is really resonating, they're thinking, I could use some help along these lines, what's the best way for folks to plug into what you guys are doing?
Thank you. Yes. So we do this full time at richereveryday.com. So that's our website, and you'll see a video that goes through a very similar story to what I just shared with you today. And then we spend a bit more time going into the passive income strategies. And so Richer Every Day is really broken down into 3 phases. Phase 1 is your neurochemical habits and your subconscious programs, and we take people through the tools that we have to reprogram those. Phase number 2 is setting up the Richer Every Day system, and this is a way that we have retrained ourselves to have a healthy dopamine response instead of an inverted dopamine response. And it's a little task and a little system we use every day and that we teach that allows people to get a little bit richer every single day. And this is also retraining your brain to associate dopamine with saving money and investing money instead of spending it. And then in phase 3, at that point, we're like, hey, finally, you're ready now to start thinking about investing and what you actually want to do with your money. And so phase 3 is really dedicated to the passive investment strategies that we use, that I personally use. And we basically document what we're doing with our money from a passive income perspective. And so, that's what we do and how we're helping people through this. So.
Well, it's great that obviously you recognize you got to have those tools when it comes to investment, and that's most people's focus. But long before that, you got to make sure that it's going to stick. And this has been fascinating stuff. If you'd like to learn more about what Mike and Michelle and their team do, just send an email to Dillard. That's Mike's last name, Dillard at realestateguysradio.com. And like magic, those links will all come to you. Mike, this has been fascinating stuff. Thrilled that we had this chance for the conversation today, and man, keep up the good work.
Robert, Russ, thank you so much. It was my pleasure. Appreciate it.
There's the amazing Mike Dillard. More when we come back. You're tuned to the Real Estate Guys radio program. I'm your host, Robert Helms.
Live nationwide, you're listening to the Real Estate Guys. Find out more at realestateguysradio.com.
Stop for a moment. Why are you listening to this show? Are you dreaming of a bigger, brighter financial future? More personal freedom to live life on your own terms? What if there was just one skill that could make it happen? There is. Sales. Robert Kiyosaki says every entrepreneur must be good at sales. It's true for investors too. Sales is how you attract money, people, and opportunities. Sales is the skill used to negotiate deals and lead your team. Sales skills are essential to success. The good news is, it's a learnable skill. The great news is, we've created a 2-day interactive workshop to teach those skills to you. Make plans today to attend How to Win Funds and Influence People, Mastering the Art of Financial Selling. For dates and details, send an email to sales@realestateguysradio.com or visit realestateguysradio.com and look under events. Gain the skills you need to succeed. Email sales@realestateguysradio.com. or look under the events tab at realestateguysradio.com.
Hey everybody, it's Jay Papazan, co-author of The One Thing, and you're listening to The Real Estate Guys.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Guys radio program. Thanks for tuning into the show. We're glad you're here this week and every week. And oh my goodness, what an amazing story from Mike Dillard.
Yeah, it really is. We've followed Mike for a long time and seeing how prolific he is in terms of producing great content and having great marketing success and business success. But at the end of the day, health is the ultimate wealth. And learning how to overcome adversity of all types in business is not just business challenges or not just investing challenges. You also have to mold your personal life into it. And for him to go through everything he went through and be able to compartmentalize all of it and turn it into very useful, relevant content for folks like us that maybe haven't faced some of that stuff or have different challenges, but the idea of how you approach the problem and just girding yourself up and doing what you got to do and seeking out the answers, not taking no for an an answer, but finding a way, believing there's a solution out there. What a case study in resilience and fortitude.
Oh my goodness, so many people would have just risen up their hands and given up and just succumbed to whatever, but he's a fighter, and we can all benefit from the lessons he shared today. If you're interested in what Mike does today, all you have to do is send an email to Dillard, that's his last name, Dillard, at realestateguysradio.com. Dillard at realestateguysradio.com will make you aware of all of his resources. Hey, next week, you're the star. Yep, it's time for another edition of Ask the Guys. If you have a question for the Real Estate Guys, go to the website at realestateguysradio.com and click the button that says Ask the Guys. We'll answer a bunch of them next week. Until then, go out and make some equity happen.
This episode of the Real Estate Guys radio show is brought to you by Paradigm Life. Powerful cash management strategies using life insurance. Learn more at beyourbank.com. Mid-South Home Buyers. Low-cost, turnkey cash flow properties in Memphis, Tennessee. Corporate Direct. Asset protection strategies for real estate investors from attorney and Rich Dad advisor Garrett Sutton. Find these and other great companies under the Resources tab at realestateguysradio.com. To learn how you can expose your product or service to the Real Estate Guys audience, call 888-489-7723 extension 4. That's 888-489-7723 extension 4. Or use the feedback page at realestateguysradio.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week right here on the Real Estate Guys Radio Show.